When people drive to downtown Los Angeles, there will always be constant traffic jams. Looking from a long distance, the entirety of LA is shrouded in a layer of gray crowds. For residents, transportation convenience implies much more than just movement from one place to the other. It shapes your access to work, healthcare, and many other important aspects of life. This is episode 4 of Carbon Narratives, Mobility as Power. Mobility is often claimed as a universal right. For low-income households, the public transit system offers affordability, and for higher-income households, cars are efficient. But mobility is far from being equally available. For some people, transportation is easily accessible. When you want to drive, roads are smooth, and when you don't, Uber drivers are all waiting. You spend less time on the road, which gives you more opportunities to resolve other issues like getting to work or having more time for lunch. And for others, movement is exhausting. In major cities around the world, intercity highways and public transportations are extremely crowded, and if you don't get on a bus or a subway, you lose wages and get warnings. This phenomenon pushes you closer to the idea of a hill line, where one single event like debt or medical issues can lead to irreversible collapse on a person's economic status. And in this case, the idea of universality ignores reality. Time theft is a crucial concept for this topic. Low-income workers consistently spend more time commuting than wealthier residents, and public transit routes often connect home to city centers, but not to hospitals, industrial zones, or night shift workplaces where many essential workers are employed. Historically, the routes were purposely built for a faster transportation to central business districts. Highways cut directly through working-class neighborhoods, fragmenting communities to save minutes for drivers. In Los Angeles, the bus and metro lines runs heavily through South LA, Pasadena, and Koreatown. These are mainly working-class neighborhoods where a lot of people depend on public transit to get anywhere. But those routes mostly transport people downtown. Trying to get from South LA to jobs on the west side, then you are looking at a 2-hour commute each way every workday, if the connection were to ever exist. And meanwhile, wealthier neighborhoods has historically pushed back against transit expansion into their areas, as they do not want the increased traffic that it actually brings, not to mention the immense amount of pollution that leads to adverse health effects. And today, cities are rapidly redesigning transportation in the name of climate action. These policies are often framed as universally beneficial, where people can enjoy cleaner airs, lower emissions, and safer streets. However, sustainability does not automatically equal justice. Legislation often faces the deadly cycle of good intentions but ineffective results. Take electric vehicles as examples. In the past policies, the federal government offered up to $7,500 in tax credits to encourage people to switch. It sounds pretty desirable. But studies have shown how the vast majority of those credits have historically gone to high-income households, because they are the ones who can actually afford a $50,000 car in the first place. A Cow Matters analysis found that in California's wealthiest zip codes, where median household incomes are over $200,000, EVs are much more common and when compared to zip codes that have lower median household incomes. And essentially, the government is spending billions to subsidizing a transition that mostly happens in rich neighborhoods. The government tried to solve this with the Inflation Reduction Act of 2023, but it's only a short buffer for a fundamentally unfair system. When cities optimizes for carbon efficiency without addressing inequality, they risk exacerbating the current existing problems. Low emission mobility for those who can afford it, high friction mobility for those who cannot. The comparison here is very simple, where the wealthier households can actually afford EVs while they compose only a small portion of the society. And for the large majority of low or middle income households, inefficient transportation just creates higher upfront cost, which indirectly affects the cost that people really have to take. A city can reduce emissions while increasing injustice, and that tension sits as the heart of modern climate planning. Mobility is also governed through enforcement. People have begun to complain about biased fare evasion policies in 2019 in the US, suggesting that large enforcement should be based on economic circumstances. And for many residents, public transportation just seems criminalized. Data from cities across the United States shows that fare enforcement disproportionately targets low-income riders and people of color, and minor violations can escalate into fines, arrests, or records that follow individuals long after missed payment. Infrastructure is great, and law enforcement shows responsibility. However, if this intensifies the inequality and conflict in a society, then the system requires a systematic reform. And based on these observations, infrastructure inequality is the foundational problem. The power of mobility becomes visible during emergencies, and when natural crises actually come, it's hard to determine who gets to evacuate first. Disaster planning often assumes access to cars, flexible schedules, and financial resources, but millions of urban residents lack all three. And once again, vulnerability follows income, race, housing status, etc. Therefore, it's key to find the structural inadequacies that lies within this current system and improve them. Cities are being redesigned at an unprecedented speed as climate pressure actually demands it. But if mobility systems are built without justice at their core, they'll reproduce the same inequalities. In the next episode, we'll confront what happens when cities don't just control movements, but belonging itself.